Jody, if you're ready, um, first I'd like you to do a little bit of maybe introducing yourself again to remind some of the newer people what it is that makes you special and brought in, this amazing background and events that you have before you launch right in.
Yeah, I'm Jody Svager, and I my people have told me that my superpower is the ability to understand how social networks function in order to spark crazy innovation and explosive results. So I've done over 10,000 events and festivals. Because I tend to gravitate towards those, but I've also done a lot of business planning for people, and built marketing departments and built training and internship programs. So that's a little bit about me. Okay, so how I grew an event audience said 700% in 11 days of marketing. This is one of the things that people hire me for because I've got the ability to do that. And I have a definite format. So in this talk, I'm going to talk about how I do it, the methodology behind how I do it, a worksheet that you can use in your stuff, and takeaways that you can apply for your business. In 2008, I was hired to be the Events Promotions and Development Manager for the Russell Industrial Center. It was a 2.2 million square foot complex. Yes, I broke open 36 event spaces in here and turned it into the largest arts mecca in the Midwest while I was there. But my first weekend of doing event rentals there, it was Halloween weekend, an event called Funk Night approached me and they wanted to rent. Funk Night had been running for 10 years as a monthly event on the last Friday of each month. And the average audience was 150 to 200 attendees. They spun funk music by DJs on 45 records. So I was thinking, because with 2 million square feet, I had plenty of space to use. So what I did was I found another promoter who was also doing a Halloween event, and they also held monthly events, and they also had about 150 to 100 people a month at their events. And they usually showcased rock bands and hip hop artists and house music DJs. But their audience was different, so I knew that they wouldn't be competing for the same audience, but they had enough similarities between what they wore, their age ranges, so that way I knew that both audiences would feel comfortable going to one another's events. So it would actually create, a way that the events could increase their numbers by attending, having each other's audiences go to their events. So, I looked at all the demographics, I looked at their ages, I looked at where they shop, who was their ideal client, their customers, what they wear, and what social venues that they market to already, what those promoters were marketing to. And I offered help with my street marketing team, which at the time I had 12 people. I knew I only had a short amount of time to market, so I did a specific type of format with the street marketing. I created the market analysis worksheet that was on the website that you can download, where you can look at all these key things about where their current audience was finding out information about their event, and so I also created a market analysis worksheet for each regional event leading up to the event. I only had 7 days at that time to do it. So I found similarities where connections amongst those lead-up events could connect with the audience of the current events. And then I defined potential reciprocal exchanges with those events, like with the promoters or with the bartenders or various people. I tried to brainstorm ways to create an exchange before I even sent my street team there. And once we had that defined potential reciprocal exchange, you know, we did all this prep work ahead of time, so that way my street team was prepared when they went to the location to know who they were going to talk to and to know what potential exchange they could set up with that person. And then we also had target influencers to approach once they got there, because with short amount of time, I didn't want to send my street team in to talk to every single person at the event. I wanted to send them in to talk to 3 to 4 people tops. I actually gave them a specific directive that they were only allowed to be in the venue for 15 minutes. And because we only had a short budget to do all of this in. So what I would send them with 3 or 4 people, and one person would be outside and they would flyer the cars, and then the other 2 to 3 people would go inside and find these influencers that we'd already targeted and have a conversation with them. They'd walk in looking like the best showman of the showmen, and they'd get that influencer excited, and what would happen was the entire room would see the exchange happening, or, you know, maybe not the entire room, but a group of people around that influencer would see this exchange happening, see the influencer getting excited, and then they would want to find out what this was all about, and then our street team would leave. And then once that audience that was inside of that venue, when they left the venue, we looked at all of the locations that they would be going to after that event. The after hours restaurant, like the local Coney Island that they're going to be going to go eat, if there's going to an after hours event, if they're walking to their car just to go home. We tried to find unique artistic locations that would continue this buzz between the event and where they were headed to. So that way it's the same type of thing with marketing. You know, you want people have to see a message a certain number of times before it ingrains into their body, into their mind, into changing their habit of making them want to do something. So if you get the influencer to be excited by it, and then they have a conversation with people, that's the touch point 1. And then you find locations where you continue this buzz to go. You know, we had artistic locations that we stick the flyer in somewhere cool so it looks almost like a piece of art, so that way people would want to they catch their eye as they were walking to their car. Then they get to their car and they see the flyer on the car and they're like, oh, that's what somebody was talking about, let me grab that. Then they go to the Coney Island and the waitress has the flyers on the table, you know, and then they wake up for coffee the next morning and their local coffee shop has the poster in the coffee shop. So, you know, all those little touch points that we did, that we pre-planned out to make sure that the buzz kept going. You know, so that we reaffirmed all that through the location drops of the, you know, places that they shop at, the record stores where they get their shoes and their clothes, their favorite local food place, you know, those reaffirmed things. So what ended up happening, instead of that first one on Halloween, instead of each event increasing just a little bit, we ended up having 1,500 people come for that first one. And it was split between the two. I'd say about 1,200 people went to each, and only 300 stuck with the one. But yeah, I mean, it was incredible. It was something I didn't quite expect for that many people to show up, but we did end up having 1,500 on that first one. And so the second month, I only did 3 days of this effort, and we had 1,700 people come. And because for the one event instead of just 2, because we'd already set up that established network, and we had 1,700 people come for the second one, and then the third one, I did 1 day of street marketing, and we had 1,900 people come. And then it was just established that there was always going to be 1,800 people. They had to shut it down for 2 years to try and get it back down to the 200, because it had grown beyond what they were prepared for. I mean, they did the 1,800 numbers for about 2.5 years after this, maybe 3 years, but the venues just couldn't handle that number every month. We don't have a venue that is prepared in Detroit to have 1,800 people indoors every month. It's usually outdoor festivals that have big numbers. So anyways, so the methodology of why I do this is all based on social network theory. Social network theory, there's hundreds of years of research on this theory of how networks shift, how they connect, how they grow, how they're influenced. You can build bridges through demographic commonalities. And once you build those bridges between the demographic commonalities, you can spark explosive results. But they function best with a reciprocal exchange. It's like comparing, when you have that friend that's always asking you for something, that relationship is only going to stay strong for so long. You have to have that reciprocal exchange in order for that to really solidify in people's minds of, let's do this, let's make this agreement. Okay, so you might want to ask why a funk night might approach to you. I'm using this because Black Business Festival, it's a different industry. I did the same exact thing. I had 10 days of marketing, but I increased what I did with the touch points, and we ended up with 9,000 people come for this in a blizzard, and you couldn't see 5 feet past your car, and I still had 9,000 people come for it. So you can apply this type of worksheet, which this is the worksheet, okay? Now, I've got where they work, location of where they work, where do they shop. I only have 3 points on there because it's like the 80-20 philosophy. If you're trying to do something with the most amount of impact in the shortest amount of time, you keep that focused on 3. Now with the Black Business Festival, we increased it to 10. We tried to find 10 of each location so that way we could increase the numbers. So you fill out these key locations of your target client or your current client, because you're going to want multiple sheets of this. You don't want to just do this one time. You want to do one for your current client. You want to do one for your target client. You also want to do one for your competitors or people that might have something similar to you that you want to build a referral with, a partnership, just like I did with Funk Night and Hallapalooza. One of the main reasons why they were able to grow so big was because they had separate audiences, but they were both providing music. So by creating those or those partnerships between those two, we were able to increase the numbers even more. And then you look at the reciprocal exchange. You brainstorm stuff before you even start to go there. You try and figure out what you're willing to offer as an exchange. Those reciprocal exchanges, they can shift, they can change depending on what that target is prepared to exchange back. But if you have in your mind what you're willing to exchange before you even go there, then you end up not giving away the bank. You want to try and make sure that you've got exchange that you will be comfortable with and that you'll be happy with. Here's some more of that worksheet. What social venues do they frequent? What events do they frequent? How do they find their trusted advisors? Where do they look? Their media, their friends, their social, that type of stuff. Those are all touch points that you want to try and establish before you even go and talk to them. You want to get those touch points established so that way, once they first hear the message and get that buzz, then it gets reaffirmed every step that they're going after. And then of course, what influencers are in their networks, that's really important, because influencers, you can talk to 3 influencers in a network and you can bring 200 people. Influencers, they're called influencers because they influence. They definitely, their voice is something that people respect and they want to listen to. All right, so I tend to do the mind mapping thing where I want to look at it in a bubble, and I start that way. I'll do that, and then I'll put the two worksheets side by side, and then I'll like create, I'll say, okay, shop. They both shop at the same location, so I'll highlight that bubble and then be like, okay, those are similarities. That's two things that maybe if I leverage that bubble, then I'll be able to make that whole network shift a little bit more. Or what they wear, stuff like that. Making sure that you look at similar demographics is really, really important. And I cannot stress this enough. With events, if you're trying to fuse two networks that don't have similarities in demographics, you can have very negative results. I've seen people do this where you end up with fights or shootings or, all sorts of crazy negative stuff happens. You need to have, enough similarities in demographics so that way you don't have an event where you've got two groups of people hanging out on the sides staring each other down like, why are they here? Why are they here? You need those similar demographics so they feel more comfortable crossing over. Yeah, and then once you start to look at the bubbles, you just keep building it, and then you figure out where you end up creating this big network. So, all right, so takeaways. Every marketing push that you do, no matter what business that you are in, can be viewed as an event. You're going to want to analyze the network that your ideal client resides in, as well as your current client, as well as your competitors' clients. You want to create a partnership with another company with a different audience that has enough similar demographics that you guys will feel comfortable mixing your audiences, so that way you can do a co-marketing push, because if you really want to grow fast, that's the best way to do it. And then you find commonalities where you can build bridges between networks that your client resides in with your current networks. And then you always want to look for reciprocal exchanges, and you find the touch points where you will deliver the message sequence designed to reaffirm and continue the buzz. So that's it. Thanks for my 10 minutes. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the questions. So first of all, thank you, Jody. That was actually really interesting, because I think one of the big things most of the people here who may not be doing live events might be looking at, how do I utilize some of this for myself? So if you were to take this in a non-event format, how would you advise folks in this room to use your strategy, your process, in order to continue developing out their network?
So the worksheets can be done with, once you develop your client avatar, you should have a good idea of what your client is, where they shop, all of that. So you can look at all of the same formats that we use with marketing, with whatever product you're trying to push, with whatever service you're trying to push. I mean, I have done this for products and for services as well, where we did these touch points, because with marketing, you want something to talk about. That's why I was saying, with every marketing push, you can view it as an event, even though it's not like a specific time frame, or a specific date where people are gathering in one location. You're still trying to push people to purchase a service or purchase, your product. So, you can look at your calendar for the year, and you can say, okay, well, I'm going to do these marketing events where it's a marketing push to push people towards one thing. On, February 14th for Valentine's Day, we're going to do I love my client push. Okay, you can create these sheets for each of those events, and you can create it looking at your current client, who you want to have as a client, and then you create all these touch points and try and brainstorm ways that you'll create that sequence of engagement with them. So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you've hit on a couple really interesting things about reciprocity and networking, and it goes back to a lot of the stuff that we've talked about with arbitrage in the past.
Mm-hmm.
On these sessions. So I think all of you know I'm a huge believer in the power of creating those sorts of networks, and I do believe that they are sort of the Archimedes lever that'll allow you to move the world should you go out and develop them. And I do think that there is a massive amount of evidence to say that everything that you have done in the world of events is replicable for the folks in this room should they choose to go find those arbitrage partners. I think that is readily apparent if you guys look at just some of the value you guys get from these sessions or the relationships that you make when you are in here, because there's a lot of you who end up working together, who've helped one another, etc. You are just getting more leverage out of these relationships and out of this network. And that is a very valuable thing to continue cultivating and developing. I know, John, I know you had a couple questions too, because John and I were messaging each other during your talk to try to, figure out how we could even run TTS events in Phoenix, kind of using some of your framework here.
Mm.
But John, if you're, I know you had a couple in the can, so I'll let you you go.
I have I have a few, but I only want to address two, and I think that one of them is such a short answer that we can just kind of bundle them together. But it looks like what you did is the same thing that people try to achieve in like Facebook or Google advertising, and that's this idea of appearing everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what you did, if I were to like remodel it into something different, is you showed an ad to somebody, a targeted ad that you had established where they were going to be. You established what they were interested in. You targeted this ad, and uh, you did it in a way that was interesting, caught their eye, compelling, but they might not be into it yet. But then what happened is you started showing up everywhere where they frequented. You started showing up on inside of their. I'm remodeling this now. You started showing up on blogs that they were reading. You started showing up in stores that they were going to, meaning online stores. Metaphorically, transitioning this to an online advertising concept is what I'm doing here with retargeting. You started showing up in online searches that they were searching for, and you were popping up on the side. So that's really, really, really powerful. And 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 what was your radius of area that you were covering? Because it's the same thing in doing paid traffic on like Facebook or Google. If you were doing an event, you would target certain zip codes probably
Yeah.
Mhm.
to
Well,
do this.
with the with those Funk Night ones, they had I would say slightly smaller radius, but not really, because a lot of our event audience from that, they were in Detroit in certain neighborhoods, but they were also in the suburban cities to the north, Ferndale and Troy and Rochester. So, I mean, it's a distance of 40 miles.
Sure, but it
So,
wasn't over in Arizona
no,
and in the Phoenix metro here
no.
we have Sun City. And
Yeah.
Sun City, the demographic is over 65 more than likely, and if it's not over 65, it's over 50 for
Yeah, I
sure.
mean, we didn't target Grosse Pointe because we knew that most of them,
Okay.
I mean, like they wouldn't have the same. There were certain locations that this audience would shop at in Ferndale, and that are funk oriented. But like with the
Okay.
Black Business Festival, we increased the numbers to 10. But also we looked at the demographics, and we were catering to Black business.
Sure.
So we were trying to look at entrepreneurial groups. We did go outside of the city for the entrepreneurial groups because we knew that that demographic wasn't only residing in Detroit, but
Hmm.
it was a we tried to increase the numbers of locations. We still only had 10 days to do it, but
Okay.
we increased the numbers of touch points and the
That's
numbers
fascinating.
of referral partnerships.
It's really fascinating how you did what retargeting and remarketing aims to do, and you just did it live. It's really, really neat. And then the second question that I had was, what was for Funk Night only,
Mm-hmm.
and just for the first one,
Mm-hmm.
what was the budget? Not what did they pay you, but like what was the budget for advertising itself?
$1,000.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible.
That's why I knew I didn't have a lot of time.
Right.
And why my staff only had 15 minutes at each location, because I wanted to try and hit multiple locations, and I wasn't paying them to go party. I was paying them to go market.
So wait a second. The $1,000 ad budget went to pay the street team too? Wow. So I'm going a little deeper on this because I am very curious. What was the budget allocated for printing?
That one, they always, because they only had so many flyers. I think they did 5,000 flyers, which in Detroit you can do those for $150.
Okay, that's incredible. So it's and I might be making this more elementary than it is, but it was like $150 in supplies and $850 to go.
No, they were responsible. They gave me $1,000 for street team.
They gave you $1,000 to pay the street team.
Yeah.
Got it. Very cool. This, I think it's fascinating.
And I mean, they didn't have to pay for me because they were already paying for me with the event rental.
Right. So like this is interesting because a lot of you in this room, you've probably heard the term guerrilla marketing bandied around. That's exactly what this is. It's a combination of influencer marketing. It's a combination of networking. It's a combination of, this sort of guerrilla effort. And it shows up in this one particular event where you can see crystal clear how these things can come together and how much of an impact they can actually have. I mean, I have a couple questions I think would be cogent.
It's joint venture too.
Yeah, it does.
It's incredible.
Absolutely. It's got and I think the important thing about showing all of these commonalities is that every single one of those things works, has worked, is currently working, right? Based on laws of reciprocity.
Yeah.
Affiliate marketing works based on laws of reciprocity. Networking works based on laws of reciprocity, right?
I'm sorry. Can you do this for a webinar? Could you do this live for like an online event?
Yeah. I mean, with everything going virtual, there's ways to shift the, it's like I put the, the worksheet has a lot of stuff about, where you can look at it and get stuck in the reality of where they would go physically, but you can actually shift it to be virtual too, because people are still shopping. People are still, working. They're still, they're still doing stuff. They're still finding their media and their news somewhere. They're still finding, they still have influencers that they listen to. So, yeah, no, you can definitely do this virtually as well. I mean, in fact, doing it virtually opens up a whole new world. Like I've been working through these exercises for, creating my new network, and I'm no longer it's like I'd always maintained a global network, but now I'm really looking to work within the global network. So I'm trying to shape this network in a way that will produce explosive results that I can handle. And I mean, that's the other thing too, is because you don't want to do what I did to Funk Night, and these poor kids were not, I mean, as much as like the numbers are great, they were not prepared for this, and they were fine the first 3 ones because they had me behind it and I'm used to large scale events. But like after I wasn't there anymore, they had a lot of problems. So
let me ask you a question about, because I think this will bring it into the realm of let's say, touchable, reachable, doable for a lot of the folks on this call. But how do you define, how do you get in front of those influencers? How do you find those influencers? Because that is such a huge part of most guerrilla marketing strategies. There's, I mean, any book you read on guerrilla marketing is a hell of a lot of it is influencer based.
Well,
So how are you identifying a good influencer that's reachable, that's viable, et cetera, versus a bad one? And then what are you doing in order to create those examples of reciprocal exchanges?
so with events, it's about being a wallflower at first. You go into a venue and you look at which bartender in the location has the biggest line. And do they all have lines, or is there only one? Because typically, you know, if the bar is busy and everybody's got a line, it's harder to see. But if one person has a line and everybody else, like another bartender standing around, it's because that bartender with the line, everybody wants to see. Everybody wants to talk to. That person makes the best drinks. That person is the person that people want to get their drinks from. They are an influencer. Then you look at the dance floor. You look at who is the person that is not only dancing, but they're getting the floor to dance. You know, you're looking at who, and then you look at who is talking to everybody, who's hugging everybody, who's the person that you know. And at networking events you can do this as well, where you look at the floor and you see who is going around and talking to everybody, and the reactions of people afterwards as well. You have to see the reactions of them, because if somebody's going around and talking to everybody and when they walk away the look on people's faces is not happy, that's not the influencer. You don't want to get that person. You want to see somebody that's going and engaging with everybody, and the reaction of the people that they talk to is positive. You know, it's all about seeing how people react to that person. And then with the other influencers that we look at are the resident DJ of who is going to be at that event, or the promoter, or, you know, like who, yeah, I mean, the promoter was always invariably the person that we would also try and talk to, whoever was in charge, you know. So at a networking event, it would be who is in charge of the networking event, who's in charge of booking those panelists and those people, you know, who's in charge of the schedule. If you see somebody walking around with a clipboard, you want to talk to them, okay? Because if you're they're going to be the ones that really know how that event runs, you know. And plus, if you build a good relationship with that person, I mean, they've just influenced an entire room of people to be there. You know, or they're influencing the schedule, or they're influencing, you know, it's like whoever has the clipboard is usually the one.
This is that, yeah. Like, that's fascinating, because I'll tell you, this is, you're sort of talking about what I've done in networking groups over the past decade. You know, like there's a ton of people that, you know, I started going to Genius when I was in my early 20s. And I didn't know anyone at Genius, and there was all these insane high level people. And all I did was stand back at the back of the room, and you can see it's like schools of fish, right? They're like, people are following one person, and they're like all fighting over talking to this one person. You want to know who you need to know in any network, stand at the back of the room, and when breaks get called, see who has a pool of like 10 people waiting to talk to them.
Yeah.
Those are the folks that are worth knowing, and they become huge ambassadors for whatever it is that you do, if you can create value and if you can be just helpful and develop those relationships. I'll tell you this much too, like for you guys that are just getting started, or if you don't have a huge network, or if you're switching spaces and you don't have a huge network in the new space you are in, it is very easy to create value for people just by showing gratitude for what they are doing. You do not need to be doing services and all types of stuff to make a space for yourself in someone else's mind. Okay. When I was 20 something, at the beginning of, like, probably 22 or something like that. I had no value to add to anyone at Genius Network. What I could do is be open and honest about how much of an influence that person had on me, or how effective what they were talking about was, or how interesting or important it was. And guess what? That cracks the door open for you to have more conversations, to develop things further. What Jody's talking about here, I mean, you could put it in the sphere of events, but I don't think it belongs in the sphere of events. I think it belongs in the sphere of influence. I know that if I go to an event, I can look and instantly figure out who are the key figures here. Who's the MC? Who's the host? Who are the folks working on the team? You know, this is a thing that I think has been a huge part of my own success. And Jody's giving you sort of
your avatar, your top 10 list. Right there, you're finding top 10 influencers with all these different locations. So if you start there and then you go and try and build a connection with them, you know, by asking them questions, telling them things about them that you appreciate, you know, opening up that door, just like what he's saying, you know, with asking questions and complimenting and talking about what they did, then you start to create a bridge into their network by creating a bridge to that influencer. So
yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I mean, this is so valuable for you guys that do speaking. If you're doing shows, if you're doing any kind of public facing work, there is no reason that you cannot be paying attention to who are the big fish in the room that the rest of the school are swimming around. Those are folks that you absolutely should be, you know, rubbing shoulders with, getting to know. I mean, I used to always figure out who's the big fish and then who's that person's like team. I would rather befriend the folks on the team if I can't get directly into that person.